My first taste of graphic design was back when I was a teenager, and my dad would bring his laptop home from work and I would dig into using Photoshop. Back then it was 5.5, and I would make these crazy gradient backgrounds to make title pages for my school workbooks. And then on the other side of things, my mum would have all these old Letraset sets, and I'd pull out these Letrasets, scrape the little letters and look through the books at all the different fonts and typography. I found it all so fascinating, and it's funny to look back and realise that I was really fascinated and interested in graphic design before I even really got into it. Now, technology has come a long way since then, and there's so many more options when it comes to designing and creating graphics. So all these years later, from those first initial experiences with Photoshop, I thought today I would share with you the software and tools that I use for designing. So firstly, my love for Photoshop certainly hasn't died off. It's that old reliable friend that I literally could not imagine life without. Despite all the other alternatives available, Photoshop is still my best bud. I tend to use it for simple layouts that are mostly photo illustration based, as it doesn't do text quite as well as a lot of other programs, but I still love to illustrate in Photoshop, and it has this added ability to animate illustrations too. And I find it's really good when I want to be able to add textures and I want to edit some images just in a real simple way. If I want to do more complex edits, then I might want to use Lightroom. But for just quick, simple edits where I just want to lighten the photo or make it black and white or add some illustration over the top to it, then Photoshop is really great for that. So, for example, this little layer I did, this is for a background for a podcast cover, and so I edited the photo a little bit, and then I've overlaid this illustration that I've created, and then I've added a lot of texture in there too, so it has this really beautiful watercolor feel. And I find if I ever want to do anything with a really, I'm starting to move more over to Illustrator now. Illustrator really is a little bit easier. I used to also do a lot of website layouts in Photoshop, and also easier to change and move things around. But for a long time I was using Photoshop for this, and I'm sort of familiar with it, so sometimes when I want to do things more quickly, I tend to go towards Photoshop more. And then illustrations. So for a very long time, I've been doing illustrations using Photoshop. I've started to get into using Procreate because middle of last year I got an iPad Pro, so I'm just starting to move into doing a bit of illustration work using Procreate. But I mostly have been illustrating using Photoshop, and that's what I've used for probably 8 or 9 years. And even before that, I think I fiddled around with different illustrations using photo. So if you're wondering how I actually do that kind of detailed work like illustration or creating textures, things like that, for starters, I use a lot of different brushes, so I definitely get a lot of different cool brushes to use with Photoshop. But then my other secret tool that I love is some hardware, which is a Wacom Tablet. Now, I've had this Wacom Tablet for 10 years, which is a bit crazy to think. I don't know where that time's all gone. But being a left-hander, I actually find mice quite awkward because a mouse is designed for right-handed people because, you use your right hand for a mouse. I really find that the Wacom Tablet flows a lot better for me, and it just feels more natural. It doesn't feel as awkward as a mouse does. And so I absolutely love illustrating with it. And I even use it sometimes as a mouse because to me it just feels so much more natural. And I know some people find Wacoms a bit awkward because there's that whole hand-eye coordination of you're looking at the screen but then the Wacom's on the table, so it's in a different place and you have to get used to that. But I found I just did a lot of practice in the beginning and got used to it, and the more and more I was using it, it just became natural that I just don't even think about it anymore. It just feels so natural and easy. Now, back to the world of Adobe, because I'm a total Adobe fangirl. It's probably just that I'm just so used to it because I've been using Adobe since forever. But the other main program that I use is Illustrator. Illustrator is the program I use when I want to be doing work that involves vectors, because Photoshop creates rasterized images, which means they're pixel based. So you're not going to be able to resize them. So it's great for really textured things and photography, that kind of stuff, where it really is heavily textured and a lot going on, and it's not going to work so well as a vector because vectors tend to be a lot more smooth and straight. You can get creative with textures with that, but it just has this different feel to it. So I find that there's particular things that I want to use Photoshop for and other things that I want to use Illustrator for. So Illustrator is when you really want those strong graphics, and if you want to work with text, because obviously it's really easy to work with text, unlike Photoshop, which doesn't look so good with text. And then the main thing that I use Illustrator for is logo design. So this really is the software when it comes to creating logos and brand boards. However, the next program that I'll look at in a minute, once we just have a quick look at this, it's more for when you're really heavy text-based stuff. Illustrator, I wouldn't go too heavy with text. Like if you're going to be creating like a PDF printable where it's got lots of text, or an even ebook, things like that, then Illustrator, it can't really handle too much text without it getting too complicated or taking up too much time. So I'll show you in a sec another program that's great for text heavy stuff, but we'll just have a look at what Illustrator can do. So as I said, logos are a big thing when it comes to Illustrator. So I create all my logos with Illustrator. This means that I can completely customize text, create typography from scratch, can really get in there and really work with the graphic. And then it's also good for all the parts of branding too. So laying out the color palette and the fonts and any other graphics. Social media templates are great on Illustrator because there's not heaps of text, and you can easily create templates for yourself too. So as I said, I'm starting to move into using Illustrator for web layouts now. So this is an example of that. So there is a fair bit of text, but not crazy amount. But I find that's all right when it's web design, because you're not going to be printing that anyway, so it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just to show the actual design, and you can easily copy that text and whatever you need to do. But it makes it easy that if I want to move certain elements about, I can easily move them. And if I want to select heaps of things at once, I can easily grab everything and move it, which I found was a lot harder in Photoshop to try and grab lots of things at once. So it does make it easy if you suddenly think, oh, I wanted to put something above this area here. You can easily grab everything and move it. So it is a lot easier doing web design layouts in Illustrator. Now this logo up the top here was actually a logo I created in Photoshop, because you see there's a lot of texture and it's got that watercolory feel. So it's that heavy textured stuff that I tend to lean towards Photoshop a bit more. And then here's an example of some graphics, some icons that I created in Illustrator. So you can see that Illustrator really lends itself to these beautiful, smooth vector graphics, and it's really easy to create in Illustrator. So the main tool that you want to get the hang of if you start using Illustrator is learning how to use this pen tool. The pen tool is just amazing. It does take a bit of time to get used to it though. When I went to design school, we actually spent several lessons just learning how to use the pen tool, because it does take a little bit of practice to get the hang of it. But once you do, you really can create so much amazing stuff with it. And too, it has a lot of shapes, so you can use shapes as bases, and there's just so much stuff you can do that you can create beautiful things. And then because it's vector, you can easily resize it to any size. You can, blow it up really big or make it really small, and it always looks really great. Alright, so as I said, the program for when you're getting more heavy with text. So this is for if you're creating things like ebooks and those sort of PDF type things where there's a lot more text involved, and you really want to make sure that you're laying out your text really nicely. So what I use for this is Indesign. So Indesign, I don't use as much as Photoshop and Illustrator because I'm not doing as many kind of workbooks and ebooks and all that kind of stuff, but it is brilliant when you want to be able to do lots of text work. And there's a lot of stuff, so you can set up pages in a way that it repeats certain things. So if you've got elements that it's going to be on every page, or page numbering, stuff like that, it's really easy to do that. And you can also set up different types of typography. So if you want to be using all your paragraphs a certain font and certain size, then you can actually set up paragraph styles so that it's really easy to keep copying that over all the time. So it really makes it easy when it's really text heavy stuff. Now, if you're wondering what I use to actually edit and videos like this, what I use is Adobe Premiere Pro. So for a long time, I just used iMovie, but just in the last probably about 6 months, I decided I really wanted to learn Premiere Pro because I have the complete Adobe suite, so why not use the programs I've got? Plus, it's great to use something a little more advanced that's going to make things look really good. So as you can see here, this is where I edit all my videos. So you've got the audio tracks and then you've got the video track, and it's just where I can chop it all up and, you know, fix up any audio I need to fix, add in extra graphics or, you know, overlay videos. It's actually pretty easy to use once you get the hang of it. It's, you know, just one of those things where you've just got to get in and start playing around and learn it and just learn the basics of it. And it just makes it really easy to edit videos. And then if you notice all the little graphics like text overlays and my intro that I add, if you're wondering how I'm doing them, I actually use After Effects for them. I won't open that up and get into that because After Effects is a pretty full-on program, and you really need someone to really help you out to learn that because it is a fairly complicated program. But in design school we did actually go through After Effects and learn how to animate. So I did animate all my own intro logo and all the text little things I do. I animate them all myself. Basically I just use the same templates over and over because recreating, you know, new animations all the time, it's very time consuming. After Effects is very time consuming, and I find the program is very slow too. It tends to slow your computer down a lot, so it's not something you want to be using all the time unless you've got a really powerful computer. But it is a lot of fun though. I really enjoyed that. I always have had an interest in animation. I really find it interesting. So yeah, I use After Effects for that, and it is a lot of fun, and you can create some really cool stuff with it. So basically I just create those graphics and then I import them as videos into Premiere Pro to add into my videos. So moving on to my iPad. So as I said, I got an iPad Pro around the middle of last year, and I've really been enjoying it. It's something that I sort of really had been wanting for a long time, and I finally got one. And I've been finding it's amazing it's been an amazing supplement for design work because I primarily am using the computer, but there are some pretty cool things you can do with the iPad Pro. Now, the first thing that I've been so excited about using is Procreate. It is amazing for creating illustrations. So as I said, for a long time, I always used Photoshop and my Wacom tablet. But now I'm diving into giving a go of using the iPad with Procreate. And obviously that's a different ball game because you're using the pen directly on it as opposed to the whole hand-eye coordination involved with the Wacom. Plus it's a different texture too. The Wacom has a quite different texture to the iPad Pro. But my iPad, I've actually got a cover on it called Paperlike. If you look up Paperlike, they make a special cover that makes it feel a bit more papery. It feels more textured because a lot of people do say that the iPad feels a bit too smooth and it doesn't feel quite so natural. So that adds a bit of texture, and I find that really helpful. It's also, I find it's a very different style of illustration because the way I illustrated on Photoshop, I was using brushes and I was using lots of layers and textures and overlaying things. So it was a very different process, whereas this, you're just directly using a brush and drawing. So it's a slightly different technique, and I've been quite enjoying experimenting with it and seeing what I can do with it. And then there's Adobe Draw, which I have to say I got pretty excited about discovering. It wasn't something I realized existed until I actually got my iPad. And I love the way it tees up with the desktop Illustrator. So basically you can draw things in this program and it makes them vectors, and then you can actually open them up in Illustrator. So when I discovered that it can actually transfer into the Illustrator program, I was pretty amazed and like, wow, this is pretty game changing. All you have to do is just say open in Adobe Desktop app Illustrator, and then you look at your computer and boom, it just opens that file up. You don't even have to, go find the file, transfer it, anything crazy like that. So it's pretty impressive that way. And then there's Finitude Designer. Now, I haven't actually dived into this myself yet. I bought it just at the beginning of this year, so I'm yet to really dive in and use it, but I have to say I'm pretty excited about it because it, just like Adobe Draw, creates vectors, but also has the option of creating pixel images too. Like there's two different, I can't remember what they call it, but basically you can flip between which one you want to use. And it's a little bit more detailed than Adobe Draw, so I like the fact that Adobe Draw just connects with Illustrator, but this one, it looks like if you want to create something a bit more complex and detailed, then it's really great for that. And also it uses text, because that's one thing, maybe I just haven't spotted it yet, but
Adobe Draw seems to just be drawing, really. It's just, you know, meant to be an illustration app. So the fact that Finitude Designer you can actually add text, really exciting, because I wonder, you know, how far can you take that? How much can you be just using your iPad rather than using the computer all the time? Because basically I gave up using a laptop. Last year I had another laptop crash on me. I literally every year was having laptops crash on me that I just decided that's it. I'm not getting another laptop, and decided to see how I'd go without it. But around the same time I had got my iPad, so I'd sort of like to see how far I can take using the iPad for designing, because it means that I'm not having to worry about if I want to be on the go. It doesn't matter that I don't have a laptop, because the iPad can do so much now. And I do kind of like the idea of being able to sit and illustrate sitting in bed or on the couch rather than sitting up at a desk on a computer. And even with a laptop, I couldn't really draw, because a laptop, it's more for typing. And so there was always a limit to how much I could do on that anyway. If I wanted to do drawing work, it really was the Wacom and the big computer. So I'm really excited about all the possibilities with the iPad, and really diving into it and trying to really push the boundaries with it and see how much I can do design-wise with it. So I hope you found it interesting to see some of the tools that I use for design work.
So let me know in the comments if there was any tools or software that you found really interesting that you'd like to explore and learn more about. And if you're a creative and you want to learn more about graphic design and branding for your creative business or your blog, then be sure to subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you next time.